The ultimate survival bow. Archery. Something us as human males have been doing to survive in our environments for millennia. For thousands of years we've used this tool. That's what we're going to talk about today. What its role is, what it is, and what it is not. So saddle up, men, for this episode of the Alpha Male Podcast. The podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man. Strong, dominant, and in control. Protecting and providing. Made in the image of God, and we don't apologize for that. Now, I usually put in a tactical verse at the end. I'm going to put it in here as well. Psalm 18. It is God who arms me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. With that, I'm going to plug in the bio, maybe do an addendum as it pertains to archery, and we'll get into today's topic. Who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion. And West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to the podcast. Where to start with archery? Next to God, so way down the ladder from God, and then my wife, my best friend, Patrick, I met. If this is true, and this is a story that he often tells about how we met, and we were young kids. I was somewhere afield, my backyard, who knows where, shooting a bow and arrow. And he came over to presumably say hello and do the same thing. We have been friends since then. Never to my recollection have we had a fight. To give you an idea, and I don't remember if that was elementary school, middle school. We were young, and I have been doing archery a long time, to put it mildly. I took my first bear with a bow, I want to say I was 16. That may not be correct. There's not dates usually on those old, this is pre-digital photos. But I took my first bear with a bow. I think I was 16. I may have been 15. I may have been 17. But somewhere in there. And I had been shooting a bow a long time by then. I have shot bow a long time. I competed in 3D archery competitions. So I've competed in archery. A little bit of background on me in archery, to lay down some street cred, some bona fides on me talking about archery. Now, if this interests you, the ultimate survival bow, I should mention on the other podcast, one of the other podcasts that I do, Gunfighter Life, I've talked about the ultimate survival 22, and I just recorded one on the ultimate survival shotgun setup. Just if you want to listen to those, that's on Gunfighter Life. But I know that guns don't apply to everybody. There's a lot of people that maybe can't legally, or don't have a Second Amendment, or whatever the case may be, don't have guns or access to guns. Sometimes I'll put gun content on here because the vast majority of the listeners are American. But usually just strict gun content goes on Gunfighter Life. So if that interests you, go check that out there. With that said, bows are not guns. I do not think that a bow is a better weapon to protect yourself or put food on the table than a bow and arrow. I do not advise you picturing yourself riding off into the sunset in a post-apocalyptic Robin Hood type scenario with just you and your bow. A gun is a far better tool. A gun is a far better tool for both putting food on the table and defending yourself and loved ones. It just is, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not. That said, archery has a place. Bow and arrows have a place. We'll say, oh, they're quiet. Well, so is a bolt action 22 with 22 shorts or CB caps. Super quiet. Much better rate of fire. Much better, it's just a better tool. And if you're talking about that, you can also, if you hand load some pretty heavy for caliber, low velocity 38 specials and 44 specials that are crazy quiet without a suppressor. I did a whole episode about quiet without a suppressor. So there's that. And also, if we're talking about post-apocalyptic without rule of law, man, I'm not telling you to do this because the ATF would have a problem with that. But I'm just going to say that suppressors, if there was no laws against them, are super easy to make. They are very simple, and you can make them in minutes. So chew on that pragmatically however you will and take that however you want. And I'm not telling you to do that. That's highly illegal, at least here in America. I'm just saying, if we're theorizing in a post-apocalyptic scenario where there is no federal government, but they do have a place. I have hunted with them. People have been hunting with them for eons, right? And again, there's places where people aren't allowed to have guns. Train with what you can train with. Cultures throughout time and history, whether it's Japanese or Romans or the English or Vikings, bow, archery, Native Americans, archery has been protecting us and putting food on the table for thousands of years, for millennia. So it'd be kind of silly to not take advantage of that and not have it as an option. I'm not telling you to get rid of your truck shotgun, to get rid of your 12 gauge home defense gun and start carrying a bow. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying maybe it has a place in your arsenal. I'm looking over right now. I'm recording this from the studio, meaning a weight rack with a microphone set on top of it with a laptop. My bow, and I'll get to exactly what that is in a little bit. Recently brushed up on it to make sure that I was still familiar with it and get back on it. By God's grace, I dry fire, except for a Sabbath, hopefully every day. Don't practice archery every day, I'm not going to lie, but since I've been in this, what I will call people hive, can't really live fire and just shoot live rounds off where I am. Pretty densely populated area, but what I can do is archery in the backyard. So I've recently brushed off the bow, got a cheap target, and we're going to talk about archery today and the survival setup. Now first, let me make a lot of people that are kind of into this mad. What I don't think is the best ultimate survival bow option, your hunting compound bow. And I grew up hunting with a compound bow. I've shot a lot of recurve and compound, but for years and years, that was my go-to, a compound bow. It's the best for hunting. That's why hunters use them. For hunting the way that we hunt today, usually in a tree stand or a ground blind, for that kind of hunting, there's a reason they dominate that. If you go to a recurve or something, it's because you want more of a challenge. But I would submit in some kind of scenario, a survival scenario, is that the most likely hunting you're going to be doing. You might be moving from one place to another, in which case snap shooting or more instinctive shooting is more likely. And the compound bow, which is meant to be drawn and held and carefully aimed, can take quite a while, especially with the traditional compound bow setup, with the release, if you don't know, mechanical release, with sights that you have to line up in a line, have a pretty legit form in your body and everything to shoot effectively with. Again, they're great for what they are. I would submit in post-apocalyptic hunting, spot and stalk hunting, which is the kind of hunting that I like to do, maybe not as relevant as you might think, maybe not the best option. Also, rate of fire. They are not fast to draw, hold, pin back, aim, and then fire. Also, if we're talking about defense, that plays really big into that. Defense. Most defensive scenarios, we're talking modern gunfights, are over in seconds. Think about how long it takes to properly set up, put on the rest, draw, aim, and fire a compound bow. It may be a scenario you can envision where like somebody is assaulting somebody else and you're not in immediate danger and you have time to draw and carefully aim and pick out which pin to use and take a deep breath and a slow, steady release on that mechanical release. That may some time in this kind of peanut butter and chocolate hitting the fan scenario come into play. But I would submit it's not the most likely. If somebody ambushes you, likely not going to have time to get that compound bow into action. Sorry to tell you that, but I don't think it's the most likely. And I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what's realistic. So if you are a bow hunter, congratulations. I'm proud of you for that. I'm not saying that facetiously. I really am. Bow hunting is a hard thing. But that's probably not the best or ultimate survival bow setup. Also, you think of one of the great things about archery is arrows, and you can make your own arrows. Well, you can't do that really with a modern, high-powered compound bow. They use carbon fiber arrows. And I would submit I can make my own black powder and reload ammo over and over again and make my own primers easier than I could fabricate brand new carbon fiber arrows. Those compound bows are usually of such a strength you can't safely use wooden arrows. So the whole making your own arrows thing, I'll never run out of ammo, that kind of goes out the window with modern compound bows. With, modern hunting draw weights. So you can get rid of that. You're going to have a carbon fiber factory post-apocalypse, right? Don't shoot your traditional wooden arrows, nor can they safely. They might actually snap the arrow. That whole making your own ammo, which is a great thing about the bow, that kind of goes out the window when it comes to those kind of bows. And you might say, well, yeah, but you can reuse your arrows. And you can to a point. If you're practicing on a good, dedicated archery target. Any bow hunter that's successful will tell you, even if you hit that animal right, even if you shoot that deer correctly, a lot of times you ruin that arrow. That arrow gets snapped off and they move their leg back, it gets stuck behind the shoulder, they run into a tree, whatever the case may be. So you're not going to have an unlimited supply of arrows. Even if you hit your target, they're likely to break. And talking about practice, even the best marksman misses from time to time. If you miss your nice legit archery target and hit a tree or something, you're very likely to shatter that arrow with the amount of energy in a modern compound bow. I'm not telling you not to have a modern compound bow or to hunt with it. I'm telling you I don't think, for all the reasons stated, that it is the best survival bow. Also, they're mechanically complex. And when you talk about complexity, that's kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum for what you want for post-apocalyptic. You kind of want simple and reliable. The amount of moving parts that a modern compound bow has versus like a Glock 19. It's a pretty complex machine, a modern compound bow, as opposed to a basic longbow, which is in its simplest form a long piece of wood with a string. It's a pretty simple weapon. Next, let's make a whole other chunk of people mad. What's also, I think, a very poor choice for the apocalypse: the crossbow. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I think it's a horrible choice for a post-apocalyptic weapon. If you have a poster of Daryl from The Walking Dead in your bedroom, I'm not here to analyze that. You deal with that. It might look cool in Hollywood, and crossbows are very cool looking weapons, which is why I think they show up in a lot of these kind of genres. But I've got to just raise my hands and say I think these are a horrible, horrible post-apocalyptic choice. The rate of fire of crossbows is abysmal. Yes, they were used in militaries in the Middle Ages in mass groups of men in like squads or platoons or battalions. One guy reloading one crossbow, especially a modern crossbow with that heavy poundage, it's glacially slow. You get one shot. And that might be fine sometimes, but what if there's two adversaries? Maybe you're going to be a post-apocalyptic sprinter, which you should have good cardio anyway. But you get where I'm going there. It loses on the rate of fire. It's even slower than a modern compound bow, which is pretty slow. It's really, really slow. If you're talking about modern hunting with a crossbow, with a modern crossbow, yeah, they're great for that because you're going to wait for the proper opportunity. Also, you run into the same problem. They're such high-powered machines. You're talking about very high-tech projectiles. You're not talking about wooden bolts. You're not talking about wooden crossbow bolts here. That's the proper term. I may call it an arrow accidentally, but it's a bolt and a crossbow. But if you're talking about a high-powered modern compound bow, you're probably not making wooden arrows that work effectively in that. So that whole making your own ammo thing, again, is out the window. The rate of fire is crazy slow. So I don't think it's the ultimate survival bow setup. And I started thinking about this when I started gravitating in my life towards practical, what I'll call preparedness, survivalism. I don't apologize for being a survivalist, for being a prepper, for watching and being ready. No, I had used a compound bow successfully and competed in it for a long time. Since I live as a neo-nomad, I took a step back, and even though I had a lot of sentimental attachment to that compound bow, I got rid of it because as a neo-nomad, there's only so much room I have for the superfluous stuff in life, and I didn't need two bows. So I got rid of it for a recurve bow. Now I'm going to tell you more about my specific bow, but I think a longbow or a recurve bow is the best choice. It is the ultimate, to me, in my opinion, the ultimate survival bow. If you're talking about just a straight longbow, just a straight wooden longbow, right? That's pretty simple tech, as I explained. It would be a great choice. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of dedication, but it's basically a very particular and shaped particular way piece of wood with a string. If you break your string, that's another thing about a compound bow. If you break your string, what are you going to do? You're not making one out of deer tendon, right? If you break the string on a longbow or a recurve bow, you can make one out of 550 cord or out of literal tendon off an animal. That's how they made them originally. There's a lot of advantage there. It's a very simple machine. Recurves, if you don't know what they are, the name kind of explains it, but maybe look that up. So I'm going to submit that a longbow or recurve bow is the best. You can fashion your own arrows. Full disclosure, I do have and use mostly carbon fiber arrows, but I do have and have used wooden arrows for my bow. I have the best tool for the job now. If I should need to, I can make arrows. I'm not a professional fletcher. Fletcher is somebody that makes arrows, but I can do it in a pinch. Especially if post-apocalyptic is my full-time profession. It has that advantage. It's a much faster rate of fire, especially if you're acquainted with snap shooting. You can go from just walking with that bow to firing a shot really quick, much faster than a modern heavy poundage compound bow. You can draw them back and hold them and fire them if you want, but you can also just draw them very quickly and release and do snap shooting with them, which is much more beneficial in most defensive scenarios and a lot of spot and stalk hunting scenarios, or scenarios where, let's say, primary mission today is to get somewhere, and as somebody that lives off grid quite a bit, to go get water. If you live off grid, getting water can be quite a chore. My job is to go get water several times a day maybe. A deer jumps out in front of me. I have a much better chance of getting a shot off, a snapshot, with a recurve or a longbow than I do with a modern compound bow. Now, if you're talking about making a ground blind or going up in a tree stand, that's one thing, but again, you got to think of your arrows. Even if you hit your deer, you're likely to mess up that arrow, and you're not just making new ones for a modern compound bow. So hopefully that's a cogent argument. You may disagree. Hopefully you disagree based on some facts that you have and experience that maybe I don't, versus emotions. Now let's step into my bow. Now, I am going to tell you the bow that I have, not necessarily, and probably not the bow that you should get. I have a PSE Coyote, PSE. That's the name of a very prominent bow archery company, PSE. The PSE Coyote is kind of a hybrid. It has an aluminum riser, much like a modern compound bow. It also has fiberglass limbs as opposed to wood limbs on a more traditional recurve or longbow. And you might think that's pretty high tech, and I agree, aluminum risers and fiberglass limbs are very high tech. But these are very simple. It could break, it gets run over with a vehicle or whatever, I fall down a cliff. I could break one of these fiberglass limbs. And then I'm probably not ever going to be able to fashion another one exactly like it. Although it's also likely that I could fall with a wooden bow and break the entire bow, in which case I have to make a whole new bow. In which case I'd be in the same boat that I'm in with this bow. I'd have to make a whole new bow, or at least make new limbs for this bow. But until that point, I have a pretty good bow. And you'd have to do something pretty legit to break some beefy fiberglass limbs in this bow. And the aluminum riser, I guess you could break it, but you'd probably have to do it intentionally, like with a metal saw or something. One of the big reasons I chose this as my one go-to bow, again, I live neo-nomadically, it breaks down. I can literally, with my own body strength, compress the bow, take the string off, and then unscrew the limbs. And it's about the third, maybe a little bit more than a third the size of a comparable powered bow. So I can pack it small and handily. I could have my go-to long gun, and then a handgun, and then I could have this just packed away. It doesn't weigh very much. The arrows don't weigh very much in a pack. Or I could also conceal it somewhere that you couldn't hide a traditional bow. Right? You're not really concealing, as cool as it was in the old movie Robin Hood, I think, where he puts it in like a staff or something. You're really not concealing a long bow or recurve bow that doesn't take down very well. At least not as easy as you can conceal this one that takes apart and goes into a very small package. This bow can use the aid of modern sights like the tritium fiber optic pins and a peep sight on the string. If you don't know what that is, you might want to familiarize yourself with that if you want to get into archery. You can also shoot it traditionally. I can take none of those sights and still use the bow. I can also shoot it with wooden arrows, and I have wooden arrows. I can also shoot it without the need of a release. Now, releases are better. They make it a little bit more accurate. But I can draw it back with my fingers. Try drawing a modern compound bow back and releasing it with your fingers. They're meant to be used with a mechanical release. Just one more piece of kit, one more piece of heavy, one more piece of complexity. I can use with this if I want, but I don't need it. So I can snap shoot with this. I can also aim it like a modern compound bow. Now, it's not the same. Mine has a 55-pound draw. For getting into archery, I don't recommend anything that high. Work your way up to it. There's no let-off on these bows like there is with a modern compound bow. That's one of the big advantages for hunting. You can draw a modern compound bow and it's got 75%, 85% let-off, so you're not holding all that weight. This bow you do. Just to be honest, that's a thing with this. The trade-off is I can snap shoot it. And the trade-off is I can shoot wooden arrows and shoot it with just fingers if I need to. Big advantages there. Also, it can take down. Also, it's plenty powerful enough to kill medium game. Does it have the same flat trajectory as a modern compound bow with the same arrow? No, it doesn't. I give that up. But what I do gain is I'm probably not ruining an arrow if I miss and hit a tree or something, which I'm likely to do with a compound bow. So if I miss my practice target, I'm not likely to ruin that carbon fiber arrow. It's not going at nearly the velocity of a modern compound bow. There's still plenty enough at moderate ranges, let's say 20 yards, 25, 30 yards, to kill a white-tailed deer or be used for defense. Now, they don't make the PSC Coyote anymore. Maybe you can find one. But I'm not telling you to get exactly what I have. But if you want my recommendation, get a recurve bow. There's a technology advantage there, and there's not a lot of added complexity on a recurve versus a long bow. If you wanted to just master the discipline of a long, traditional wooden bow, I'd say that's fantastic. But that's not my primary weapon. If it's yours, you might want to look at that. My primary weapon are firearms. I still see a purpose and a wisdom in having a go-to survival bow. And I'm recommending this platform to you. Look at a takedown recurve. Now, the PSC Coyote I don't believe is being made anymore. There are other companies that make similar ones. Just look up takedown recurve bow. If you're just getting into archery, maybe go to a shop where they can help you out a little bit. I've done a whole other episode on archery. It's a great hobby to have. If you're going to have an outdoor hobby, it's usually not frowned upon in a lot of places like shooting is. Sadly, in today's world, you can do it in a lot more places. You can do it in people hives. Or you may not be able to practice with a firearm as much. or just legislatively you can't have a firearm, or you just want the joy and martial discipline of archery. It's a great hobby to have. And it's great for putting food on the table. There are whole special seasons. If we're talking about no apocalypse, we're talking about the world that is as it is today. If you like to hunt, there are usually whole seasons where I can go and hunt with my bow where I can't legally take a firearm. Might as well take advantage of that. Putting food on the table, providing and protecting, that's part of being an alpha male. So I thought I'd share with you this episode in the ultimate survival bow or archery setup. Working title, we'll see what it culminates to at the end. But I hope you appreciate this content. If you do, if you want to support, there should be a Patreon link. If you want to contact me, goodshepherdtraining.com. Also, if you want to support but you want something tangible for it, there's a gear shop at goodshepherdtraining.com. If you do hunt, there's a pretty cool apron on there. It says, "I slay beasts and eat them. I don't apologize for it." That's pretty cool. You can check that out at the gear shop, among many other things. This is a podcast where some people may disagree with me. That's fine. You're welcome to disagree. I don't pretend to think that I know everything. Again, you want to contact me, goodshepherdtraining.com. Now, normally I throw out a tactical tip of the day. I'm going to give you a few tips on archery. I'm real big on dry fire when it comes to firearms and practice. Do not dry fire your bow, especially a modern compound bow. They are not supposed to be dry fired, so there's that. Also, if this is new to you, generally have your field points, traditional just metal tips on your arrows for target shooting. You could use them for defense or for hunting if you had to, but they're not designed for that. A broadhead is designed for hunting. Make really good broadheads. They make really mechanically interesting, expandable broadheads that do work quite well, but I don't really use them. Make like really good, top quality modern steel broadheads, traditional 2-blade or 3-blade or 4-blade. They also make, and this is kind of a tip, Cold Steel makes some arrowheads that are like a really strong polymer, and they're affordable. So if you want to hunt animals, putting meat on the table, not for like a trophy hunt in your one deer a year, but you actually want to go and sustainably do this and not cost a ton of money, you might look at those broadheads. And if you're talking about birds, well, shooting birds out of the air, there's a whole specific arrow for that, which is probably, if you know what I'm talking about, you already know, and if you don't, if you're getting into archery, probably stay away from that. There are small game type heads, whether they're just blunt tips or they make other ones with little claws on them for shooting smaller game, shooting birds on the ground, waterfowl, things like that. So you may also look at that. Have kind of your well-rounded battery. And the tactical verse of the day, Psalm 18. It is God who arms me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. With that, alpha males, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.